Hey there, it's Teresa here with this Wednesday's Money, God, and Me, making the connection here. This conversation that we've been having for the past 10 weeks. This is the 10th episode. If you are joining live as you hop on, please be sure to type in and say, hey, so that I know who's here, who's joining us. Plus, I can know that you're hearing me okay. If you're watching this replay, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come back and pick this up. I truly hope that hearing what I'm sharing, really hot off the press, somehow shifts, inspires, opens up some new things for you around money and your relationship with it, around your relationship with yourself, and around your relationship with God and making the connection. So I'm just going to jump right in, because this morning, as I was just taking some time to think what do I want to share today? I literally couldn't write fast enough. It was just coming in. So some of this, this is the first one of these that you've watched, is going to be a little bit of a recap of where we've been. And then I'm going to highlight some things that were just for me this morning. It's oh, I never thought about that. This is really cool. So, the basic premise of these conversations, this big idea that I'm working with, or that's working with me, maybe is more accurate. And then I'm going to share just a bit about in a live TED-like talk broadcast, live stream in front of a live audience at the Gary Marshall Theater in Burbank, California in August, is that basically we need a new creation story to create a new financial story for ourselves individually and for ourselves collectively on this planet. Now, there are actually two creation stories in the Bible, in the Christian, Judaic Christian story, Genesis 1, Genesis 2. Many people don't know that there's actually two very distinct and very different ones. And oftentimes they get collapsed. But in the Christian tradition, especially, the piece that has most shaped the Christian narrative in actual practice is the ending of the second creation story. Now, the second creation story is the story that talks about man creating Adam and Eve, the first man, the first woman. And that story continues into chapter 3 with the story of Adam and Eve and the infamous fall. When they ate from the tree that God said, do not eat from, and they were sent out from the garden with the words that now you will struggle and toil and all of that sort of stuff. Now, just so you know, this conversation is not meant to be like a theological discussion. I'm going someplace to show you how this story impacts you, your life, your relationship with money, and ultimately your abundance. Are you living a life of abundance, in abundance, with abundance, or are you in scarcity? And I firmly believe it can be traced back to this story of the fall. My belief, my premise, is that we need to go back to the first story, or the original creation story, the original Christian Judaic narrative, and have that now begin to shape the way we relate to ourselves, to money, to God, and to creation in all, like the earth, the environment. So what I want to do here, because it's leading to where I'm going, is I want to look at the two original creation stories before the fall. Because in it, you see a pattern of how about God and how God relates to us and to the creative world. So in the first creation story, Genesis 1, you've probably heard it. It's the one how God created the world in 7 days. And at the end of each day, he said, it's good, it's good, it's good. If you would go back and read that, whether you're a Christian or not, just to read it as a story, which is what it is, that is meant to teach us something about the one who created us and the creator of all, you're going to see some very specific patterns of how God interacts and relates to us and to creation. First of all, you're very clearly going to see that God creates in abundance and with abundance. That's very clear in the story. He didn't just create one flower, one tree. Everything in that first Genesis story is showing a picture, painting a picture of a creation that is abundant. So God creates. Then we see a pattern of how God declares everything that is created to be good. It's good. This is good. This is good. Oh, look how good this is. Oh, this is good. This is good. This is good. Oh, you can always get this picture of God having so much fun. I love to create. And when I'm creating things, sometimes I get excited about what I'm creating before it's finished. And it's just like, oh, wow, that's good. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's good. And I kind of get the image of God doing that with the creation of this world. Then you also hear how God blesses his creation and basically says, now go be creative yourself, be fruitful, be multiplied. But a key thing is he blesses his creation. He blesses man. He blesses you and I before we've done anything, before we've created anything, before we've produced any fruits. That's really important because for the people that I work with, oftentimes we think that what makes us worthy and good is what we do, what we accomplish, the fruits we have to do something to earn it. And in that very original narrative, the first story, we see that that's not how God relates with us, that the blessing and the declaring of us as good comes first, not in response to anything we've done. You also see how God gives. God creates all this stuff to provide food, God gives, God gives, God gives. It's always about giving. And then on day 7, you also see a pattern of God that God rests and enjoys all that he has created. So we have a God here who creates and creates in abundance, who sees it all as good, who blesses before we've done anything to earn blessing, who gives and gives abundantly, who rests and enjoys. I like that kind of a God. That's a little different than sometimes the God that gets painted in our picture when we start with the fall. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In the Genesis 2, there's a completely different creation story of how the world was created. But in that one, we see how God created man first, and then you see how God provides. God provides all that humans need. God provides food, but God also provides that which is pleasing. So it wasn't just like necessary, the stuff we need. God created things that was simply for the beauty of it, was pleasing to the eye. God provides what pleases, makes man happy, including creating Eve in the story as a companion to Adam. Now that second story, showing this pattern of this is the God who created you and I and who created this universe, and this is what that God is like, ends saying, and that Adam and Eve were naked, but they were not ashamed. Fully exposed, fully seen, no shame. Wouldn't that be exhilarating and freeing for you and I? Then comes the fall. And if you've heard this story, this is just a recap. But God told Adam and Eve, all that I have created is yours. The only thing I ask of you is that you do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Everything else, it's all yours. Enjoy it. Have it. I created it for you. Just don't eat this fruit. But of course, they did. How very human of them. And they did it because the snake tempted them, saying that you could be even more. You could be like God. You could have more wisdom. They wanted to be more than they already were. They wanted to have more than they already had, which, when you think about it, was everything, but they missed that point. So do you and I. And then the narrative goes in a new direction. Most Christian traditions, this is when sin entered the world. And oftentimes in, especially traditional Christian traditions, Catholic, etc., the emphasis historically has been on how we are sinners. We are sinners and we're inherently bad, that we have to work and we have to be good and we have to do what God wants. Okay? So that maybe one day when we die, we can be with God in heaven. That's a scarcity-based narrative because that's a fear-based narrative. When they ate that fruit, fear entered the story. And you can hear it because reading the story in Genesis 3, you hear about how God was walking in the garden looking for Adam and Eve. So notice God was walking in the very garden that they were in, which meant God was there with them. They were one with God. God wasn't out there someplace. He was right here in the midst of creation, here on this planet with us, with them. And they hid. They jumped behind a bush and hid. They were afraid suddenly. And you hear in the story how God called to them. Another pattern of God. God calls to us. God calls to us. God calls to us. And his call was, where are you? Where are you? I'm looking for you. Where are you? How often do we hide? And this was kind of an obvious thing to me, but it was never obvious until this morning. You know where they are? They're still in the garden. They're still in the garden of abundance. They're still in the midst of abundance. All that God has created for them, the blessings, all that God has provided for them. And now they're hiding. They're hiding from it. And it says that now they knew they were naked and they felt shame. Now, God never shamed them. Although growing up Catholic, I kind of thought God did, but God didn't. They shamed themselves. They created fear because by eating of that tree, basically what they ate was the tree of judgment. Now there was good and bad. There was right and wrong. There was should and shouldn't. That separation. And that separation of judging themselves, they were judging themselves. Uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that. I was bad. I was wrong. I need to hide. I'm afraid. Suddenly, they saw themselves as separate from God, and fear entered their relationship with God, and so did shame. And I know, hearing the story of what happened to them next, of they were sent out from the garden. They were banished from the garden. They were told, now you will spend your days toiling and struggling to feed yourselves and all of that sort of stuff. As a kid, I figured God was punishing them. So I had this picture of a God who, if I don't do things right, if I do something wrong, I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be banished. I'm going to be separated from God. And the whole Christian narrative, in very, very simplistic things, takes off from that and says, our whole time here on earth, God's out in heaven, and we've got to do things right. We got to live a good life, because if we do, when we die, we can join God again in heaven. But in the original narrative, we were already with God right here on earth in all of the physical world. So much so that, does it say that God didn't shame them? It even says that, yes, he sent them forth, but I don't think that was punishment. I think that was a natural consequence, not of God's actions, but of theirs, because now they saw themselves separate. Separation is what sets up scarcity and fear, shame, struggle. Suddenly, it's not here. We have to do something for it. Take that to money. It's not like the money's already available to it. I've got to earn it. I've got to deserve it. It's out there someplace. I have to get it. And suddenly it's up to us. We're no longer in the abundance with God. We've separated ourselves from it. But to show how much God doesn't even punish them, it even says, I caught this morning, that before he sent them out from the garden, the consequence, he made garments for them. They were trying to hide behind a fig leaf. He actually made garments for them. So here, even though they've done something, quote, he told them not to do, not because it was wrong, but because God knew the consequences. God knew how it wouldn't support them. But he's still providing for them, still providing, still giving. So what does all of this have to do with you and me and money and God? Well, the original Christian story always speaks to how God relates to us, creating in abundance, providing what we need, providing what is pleasing, blessing us before we've done anything to earn it, wanting what is good for us, one with us, walking with us, wanting to help us, wanting to provide for us, always creating what is good and giving goodness to us. That's a God who wants us to experience abundance here in this life. And in this life, to fully live and be all that we're meant to be, full of life, physical, emotional, mental, honor, who we were created to be, to produce fruit and continue the process of creation, we need money. But when it comes to money, we oftentimes go to the fall. Oh, I don't deserve it. I have to earn it. Money's hard. I have to toil for it. We're off trying to do it ourselves, trying to do it right. We see ourselves and money separate from us and separate from God. Like there's God in our spiritual life, and then there's our finances and money. I talked about that the past few weeks. And God is out there. And, if we're really in trouble, we can send up a 911 prayer, 911 prayer, and say help. But more than anything, that story beginning with the fall sets up all the patterns of scarcity that limit us and affect our relationship with money. Fear, shame, judgment, right, wrong, good, bad, should, shouldn't, don't deserve, feel guilty, afraid we're going to do something wrong, afraid of not having enough, trying to control instead of create. These beliefs, conscious or subconscious, and many of them are subconscious, consciously, we'd actually say, no, I don't believe that. But in practice, like we've edged God out, ego, of our relationship with money. And so we find ourselves in debt or living paycheck to paycheck. That's a great way to show how, I'm toiling like God said, or see, I don't deserve it. You're judging and punishing yourself when God isn't. Or maybe you actually are in really good shape financially, but you feel guilty about it because others aren't. Or you have a hard time spending some of that money on things that you don't need, that would just be because you enjoy them. Scarcity. I guess bottom line, there's no scarcity in the original Christian creation story narrative. only abundance. And when the scarcity is coming in, it's because we've forgotten that. We've thought that money blesses us based on what we do or do not do. And that's not how God relates to us. That's how we relate to ourselves. God doesn't judge. We do. God calls to us, "Where are you?" We're the ones who hide and run in shame. God is always wanting to give and enjoy and bless and provide. We're the ones who say, "Oh, I got it. I can handle it. I don't need it." Or we limit how much we'll receive. Because in some way, shape, or form, I did it. Maybe you've done it, even if it's subconscious. You've bought into the creation story that ends with the fall. And that's where your story has begun. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear a couple things specifically for you to comment in. Which pattern of how God relates to us really resonated with you? And where do you see yourself, and how has the creation story, the one with the fall or the original one, how do you see that playing out in your life and in how you relate with money and the financial abundance you either enjoy or don't? I'll be back next week with another, who knows what, just sharing some more stuff around these themes. Love to have you join me. And if you know anybody who might really be blessed by this, please share it on Facebook. Thanks so much. Bye.